U.S. marijuana legal frameworks, the good, the bad, and what to expect in the future. Today, 33 states have legalized medical marijuana in some form, and 11 states plus the District of Columbia have legalized marijuana for recreational use. The rapid growth in marijuana industry combined with a conflict of federal and state laws has a widespread impact. We will explore the evolution of the marijuana industry and the marijuana industry of the future. Founding partner of Mr. Cannabis Law from the United States of America, Dustin Robinson.
Hi, my name is Dustin Robinson. I'm the founding partner of Mr. Cannabis Law, which is a full-service law firm for the cannabis and psychedelic industries. Today, I'm going to be speaking on U.S. marijuana legal frameworks. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and what to expect in the future. Real quick, we're going to talk about the history of these frameworks. Back in 1985 is when we started to see the first FDA-approved product, which was Marinol. Since then, in 1996, California created the first medical marijuana industry. So back in 1985, they went through the proper federal pathway by getting FDA approval. But in 1996 is when the first state kind of turned its back on the federal government. And so it was a Schedule I substance, but California still decided to allow medical marijuana. After that, several other states passed medical marijuana. And then in 2012, Colorado and Washington created the first recreational marijuana industry. Then in 2016, we saw Ohio create the first social equity framework. And then in 2017, my home state, Florida, created the first vertically integrated framework. So we're going to go through each of these frameworks, and we're going to talk about what's working, what's not working, and some of the benefits of each of them and what we'll be seeing in the future. So for medical marijuana, what most of these frameworks in these different states have is they have a few common threads, right? So the first off, they have qualifying conditions. So different states have a different list of qualifying conditions, things like PTSD, cancer, chronic non-malignant pain. Really for medical marijuana, it's a doctor-patient relationship. So essentially a patient is going in to see a doctor, they'll get a medical marijuana card, and then they could go, once they obtain that medical marijuana card, they can then go to a medical marijuana dispensary and purchase that marijuana. And then most states, in fact, all states with medical marijuana require that medical marijuana to be consumed in private. So they have to take it back to their home or some other private place and actually consume it. What this chart is that I've put up here is one of the big issues in medical marijuana, and it's reciprocity. So one thing to keep in mind, and I have to constantly remind some of the political figures that I talk with a lot, is that this is medical. And so when someone is traveling to a state that doesn't recognize a medical marijuana card from another state, it's unfortunate because someone who has a qualifying condition like PTSD and who has a medical marijuana card in one state may travel to another state like Florida. Florida does have a medical marijuana program, but they do not recognize it from a medical marijuana card from another state. So on the dark green side, that shows the states that do recognize reciprocity. On the right side, it shows the states that do not recognize reciprocity. And this is a constant issue in these medical marijuana states in pretty much all of the Florida legislative sessions. This is always a topic. I know in the upcoming legislative session we're having, this will be brought up again. Unfortunately, we haven't had much progress on it, but it is a huge issue. And then one other part of the medical marijuana framework is also having a caregiver. So many of the states include something with a caregiver. Each state kind of defines a caregiver differently. In Florida, a caregiver is really just someone that can be assigned to a certain amount of medical marijuana patients. I believe in Florida, it's either I think it's two is the maximum you could be assigned to. It might be one or two. And essentially, it's someone who's allowed to actually purchase the product on behalf of a medical marijuana patient, because some of these medical marijuana patients are not able to maybe get out of bed or purchase it on their own. The other framework is recreational marijuana. So this is more expanded access. And the big thing with recreational and why it's getting tremendous amount of attention right now is because of the economic benefits. You're able to charge taxes on it. So in the medical marijuana world, generally they're not going to have taxes because it's medical. But in the recreational marijuana world, they're actually deriving tax revenue, and it's a much bigger market, much bigger total available market, so you could have more sales. It's not limited to medical marijuana patients with qualifying conditions. So that also means that more shops and more employment. So not only do you see tax revenue, but you start to see unemployment start to decrease, which is obviously right now with the pandemic a very big deal, both the tax revenue part of it and the employment part of it. One thing that's important, I speak to a lot of cities that have banned dispensaries in Florida. Basically, the Florida statute allows these cities to ban the dispensaries, and a lot of the reasons why a lot of these cities ban them is because they don't want the young people coming in and smoking and partying, and they have this stigma around it. And what I always have to remind them is that the demographic in these medical marijuana markets are mainly the older demographic. So if you look at the chart I have here, the light green shows the medical marijuana demographic, and you'll see that the largest demographic, the 31%, is for people 50 years old plus. So the medical marijuana market is really an older demographic, and that's important to understand if you're a business or if you're just a city looking to regulate it. And then on the recreational side, it's quite the opposite. If you look at the chart in the dark green, you'll see that 36%, the highest percentage, is 18 to 25-year-olds for the recreational marijuana market. So very different demographics, and that is to be expected. Medical marijuana is for qualifying conditions. As you get older, you tend to have more qualifying conditions. And so that's kind of where that comes from. And then the chart on the right I provide is really just showing some of the tax revenue, and this is not insignificant. You'll see California in 2019 had tax revenue of $629 million. That is a tremendous amount. And when you start thinking about what the federal government can get if they start to legalize or at least decriminalize marijuana, the amounts are very, very, very significant. So, once again, with the pandemic and everything going on, there's really a compelling argument for the federal government to do something. I'm not saying they will do something. Unfortunately, Biden in his rollout plan actually did not include anything related to cannabis, even though in his campaign he did say that he was going in favor of decriminalization at a federal level. So obviously, it's very early on in Biden's term, so we'll have to see where he ends up lying on that. But there's no doubt that legalization of marijuana would be a huge improvement as far as the economics go. The next type of framework we have is horizontal integration. And of course, both the medical and the recreational could be either horizontal or vertical. The concept of horizontal really is just referring to having a license in one particular part of the supply chain. So you could have a cultivation license, you could have a manufacturing license, dispensary license. States like California actually have distribution licenses, and you could also have a delivery license in many of these states. So in each of these states, these licenses mean different things. Some states you're able to deliver only to the customer. Other states, they allow delivery licenses for cultivation to manufacturing. So each state kind of has different laws as it relates to the horizontal integration. But what's important for the horizontal integration, one of the benefits of horizontal integration, is the ability to specialize in a particular subset of the industry. So really in these states that you see this horizontal integration is when you really see a lot of the innovation in the industry. So if someone is really strictly focused on cultivation, they're going to be able to innovate for cultivation. If someone is strictly focused on extraction or manufacturing, they're going to be innovative as far as it goes. And same thing goes for dispensing and delivery and distribution. So really that's what you see out of the horizontal integration. I think early on, states weren't sure how they were going to handle horizontal integration. And, they may have leaned towards wanting it to be more vertically integrated because it's easier for a state to regulate. But horizontal is really where the industry is going. And that's how you see most industries. Most industries outside of cannabis are horizontal. They have raw material suppliers, they sell to manufacturers, manufacturers put it together, distribution, and so on and so forth. So I foresee the supply chain structure continuing to develop and continuing to have more chains in it. Vertical integration, Florida is the only state with vertical integration is actually required. Now in horizontal states, you could apply for all those licenses. So you could obtain, you could be a vertically integrated business, but Florida, it is required. There's actually a court case that is challenging the constitutionality, that is the Florida constitutionality of that vertical integration. It's the Florida Grown case. I'm hoping to get a decision from the Florida Supreme Court in December on that case. But vertical integration basically means that the licensee has to do all parts of the supply chain. At least that's what it is in Florida. Everything from cultivation, manufacturing, retail to delivery. Now you control the whole supply chain, so you're really not expert at any one thing. So that's one of the bad parts about vertical integration is that there's really not a lot of innovation. You're doing every single part of the supply chain, so you're really not able to become specialized in any one area of the supply chain. And I'll be honest, here in Florida, we do have a lack of innovation for that exact reason. And I'm very hopeful that we will eventually go to horizontal. One of the benefits of vertical is that if something bad happens at retail, if there's one of the products is defective and someone gets sick, it's much easier to track it back to its source, back to the seed, and destroy that lot and have a recall than if you have a horizontal structure. It becomes much more complicated to track back. The other benefit of vertical integration is that the Department of Health only has so many resources, and when they're able to just regulate one entity that does the entire supply chain, it's much easier on them. So there are benefits, and these licenses here in Florida, they're going for tremendous amounts right now. The market just for the piece of paper is anywhere from $25 to $30 million. A couple of years ago, it was $65 million. So, the licenses have gone down a little bit because more licenses have come to market. So there's more licenses available, higher supply, that's driven down the price a bit, but they're still selling in the $25 to $30 million range. So that is significant, and that is just for the piece of paper. Other types of framework is coupling. Coupling basically just means that it's a horizontal framework, but they're going to combine certain parts of the supply chain. So they might combine cultivation and processing, or processing with dispensing. I think in Florida, when they go to horizontal, my best guess is that they are going to couple a few parts of the supply chain to make it a little bit easier for them to regulate. Ownership requirements. So you'll see in a lot of states that there's a residency requirement. Now, this was actually challenged, and the U.S. Supreme Court found that a 2-year residency requirement for the liquor industry was actually unconstitutional against the Commerce Clause. So you see a lot of states starting to take out that residency requirement. So Colorado took it out. I was doing an application in West Virginia, and it was actually just after this case came out, and they actually put up a policy during the application process that actually said that residency requirement is no longer in there. But you see the residency requirements all over the place. Even Oklahoma, I have a client applying in Oklahoma. They have a residency requirement. It seems pretty clear based on this ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court that should not be constitutional, and that should not be allowed. But you still see a lot of that. You have FDA approved drugs. So Epidiolex, Marinol, I'm not going to get too far into this, but what's important to note is that really the FDA has not looked very preferentially on cannabis products, just the federal government in general. And what a lot of people don't realize, I do a lot of work in the psychedelic space, and a lot of people think that, cannabis is ahead of psychedelics, but quite the opposite. Psychedelics, MDMA is actually in phase 3 clinical trials for PTSD. Psilocybin mushrooms are in phase 2 for treatment-resistant depression. There's going to be, I think, other clinical trials that are moving to phase 1 for LSD. So the FDA has actually taken a more preferential position with respect to psychedelics compared to cannabis, and that's important to understand that. Social equity. So this is important. This is starting to come up more and more in a lot of these state programs. I know New Jersey just recently passed their recreational measure, and it was voted in, and they're talking a lot about what their social equity program is going to look like. The goal of state social equity programs is to provide ownership and employment opportunities for minorities and individuals who suffered from marijuana's previous illegal status. The language they usually use is that they're trying to right the wrongs of the war against drugs, and they're trying to help the people that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And that's the language they use in Illinois. I have kind of the goals I put out here in some of these states. I don't have time to read through all of them, but what's important is that a lot of these states are putting this at the very forefront. In fact, in Illinois, I applied for several licenses in Illinois, and Illinois, if you did not apply as a social equity applicant, it was about, I think it was 20 points they gave for social equity applicants. If you didn't apply as a social equity applicant, you essentially had no opportunity to win whatsoever. So every single application I did was with the social equity applicant, because otherwise there was just no point of even applying. So these are more states: Massachusetts, Illinois, Michigan. I'll have these slides available, and you're more than welcome to read through those social equity programs themselves. I'm actually on the board of directors on Minorities for Medical Marijuana. So we've actually worked very hard with some states on drafting these. One piece that I think is going to be very important moving forward since the 2018 Farm Bill is how the hemp industry interacts with the marijuana supply chain. So hemp is now federally legal. Marijuana still is not federally legal. However, some states are starting to take a proactive approach and letting hemp products be sold into the marijuana supply chain. I think this is going to be a huge development moving forward. I've been working very closely with our state agencies to see if we could get this through in Florida, and they have been open. We haven't gotten anything through yet, but I do expect that more and more states will start to allow hemp to be sold into the marijuana supply chain, and that will be a very, very exciting thing and very, very good for the hemp industry and the marijuana industry as well. Third-party testing laboratories, unfortunately, I'm running out of time, so I don't have too much time, but third-party testing laboratories, it's important when you're buying a legal product as opposed to the black market, at least you know that it's been tested for any bad materials, mold, pesticides, bacteria, and the third-party testing labs play a very, very important role in this industry. Future outlook, I think there's going to be more horizontal integration, more social equity programs. Hopefully the States Act starts to get a little bit more momentum, Moore's Act as well, and I think that we'll start to see more FDA-approved drugs as the FDA gets a little bit more comfortable with these substances. This is my disclaimer. I think I have about a minute for questions. I don't know if I could actually do that. I see that there are some questions on the chat. Okay, I do not see that. So I'm open for questions. I don't know how we take questions on this.
Thank you for your time and for your excellent presentation and explanation on the vertical and horizontal and coupling in the cannabis market. We would love to hear more from you later in our panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.